Architectural Outcast.
Welcome to the Architectural Outcast, that little old channel from Texas. This video is part of my ongoing series, How to Think Like an Architect. I'm going back to questioning assumptions. I want to talk about one of the worst nightmares for any storyteller, when the audience fails to suspend their disbelief. My example is going to be my old friend, George R.R. Martin. It's also going to give me an opportunity to tell you all my frustrations with George and why I've never been able to get into his work. It goes back to that whole failure to suspend disbelief thing. A storyteller creates their fictional world by making assumptions. My world works this way, assuming dragons exist. The key to a believable world is consistency. How well the storyteller maintains their world based upon those assumptions. As the audience, if we want to be able to suspend our disbelief so that we can enter into the storyteller's world, we need to be willing to make the same assumptions that the storyteller is making. We have it easy because George R.R. Martin has been very open about the assumptions he made in creating his world. Westeros has often been described as medieval realism. Martin wants to strip away idealism and romanticism from the medieval era. Martin has also been very open about how the politics of Westeros were heavily inspired by England's War of the Roses. As the audience, I walk in the door assuming that Westeros is a pragmatic examination of the Middle Ages. The politics are loosely inspired by one of England's many civil wars. Unfortunately, this happens to be a topic that I'm very familiar with. The history of architecture is the history of politics, after all. For my argument to make sense, I need to lay out some background, my assumptions. I'll talk to you all about kingship and how it operates in two very different political systems, imperialism and feudalism. In an imperial system, such as Rome and ancient China, you have a centralized state run by a bureaucracy and backed up by a standing army. The king gains their power and authority as the head of that centralized government. The aristocracy, they are also creatures of the state. They gain their power and authority, influence, and position all at the pleasure of the king. He can take it all away in an instant on a whim. The king's word is law. And depending on the personality of any given king, merely questioning him can mean death. The feudal system, on the other hand, say like medieval England, there was no centralized government, no standing army. The king gained their power and authority through a complex series of oaths and obligations. As a feudal system has no centralized state, the king does not give the aristocracy their authority. Their power arises out of the control of land and their own complex webs of obligations and oaths. In an imperial system, loyalty was a one-way street. You owed the king your life, and he didn't owe you jack shit. In the feudal system, loyalty is a two-way street. The king and the aristocracy swear oaths of loyalty to each other, pledge obligations. If the king starts breaking his oaths, ignoring his obligations, he risks losing the loyalty of his followers. Remember, in a feudal system, there is no centralized army. The king is dependent upon his lords every time he wants to raise an army. If the king has been ignoring his oaths and responsibilities, one of his lords, or even all of them, could make the legal argument, you didn't fulfill your obligations, you didn't keep your oaths, so we don't have to do the same to you. But it doesn't even have to go that far. Piss off the wrong lord at the wrong time? All they have to do is wait for the next battle. And then him and his buddies wait for the most inopportune moment to pack up and leave. Leave the king's shiny ass hanging out in the wind. The entire conceit of Martin's Westeros is it's supposed to be a realistic examination of how people would navigate this complex web of oaths and obligations assuming they were motivated entirely by self-interest, greed, and lust for power. Intriguing. This should be right up my alley. However, there is a scene very early in the books and the TV show that completely destroys my ability to suspend my disbelief. Prince Joffrey and Arya Stark are hanging out. Suddenly, Prince Joffrey pulls a knife. He's going to torture, maybe do worse, and then kill Arya. And he's brazen about it. My daddy is bigger and tougher than your daddy, so I can do whatever I want. And this is what I want to do. Stab. Arya is saved by her direwolf. Ned Stark confronts Robert Baratheon, the king. Your son just tried to kill my daughter. I want to know what you're going to do about it. The queen, Joffrey's mother, announces nobody's going to do nothing to my son. The king, he waves it off. No one really got hurt, so we're just going to let it all slide. Everybody just forget about it. Queen says, no, that vicious beast attacked my son. He could have been hurt. I want him dead. Ned says, that beast ran off. We can't do anything about it. So the queen says, I want somebody to pay. The king says, kill your wolf. Then it's all even. We're done. So Ned dutifully trots off to slaughter his own wolf. Even allowing for artistic license, this sequence of events would have never happened. And it's not just that the whole thing wouldn't have happened. Every step along the way would have never happened. The first big problem, Arya Stark and Joffrey would have never been left alone together. The Queen and Ned Stark would have never allowed that to happen. They would have never been allowed to interact without chaperones from both families. The Queen's power comes from being the mother of the crown prince, the eventual king. The last thing she wants is somebody to have private access to her son that she doesn't control or have influence over. This is also true of Ned, particularly if you assume that the only value he places on Arya is the ability to marry her off for political gain. The last thing he wants is a mark on her reputation. She would lose market value. It also is true assuming that there are schemes behind every scheme. Neither family would completely trust the other family. You never know what they would try to pull. So chaperones would be mandatory. The second problem, the moment Joffrey pulled that dagger, he revealed himself to be a psychopath, mentally unstable, unhinged, whatever term you prefer. Governments aren't suicide contracts. The last thing the nobles would have allowed, if nothing else out of self-preservation, is for Joffrey to become king. He would have been a dead man walking. Regardless of what Ned Stark did, they would start making their own plans. And once you start planning to take the head of the prince, why not just take the head of the king as well? 2 for 1. Robert Baratheon was a usurper. He had overthrown the previous king. Robert lacked the stability and tradition of a dynasty backing him up. His succession was going to be tenuous at best. So the last thing he would want is for the nobles to have a legitimate reason to be sharpening their knives for his successor. So he would have to address the issue to the satisfaction of the nobles if he wanted to have any chance of founding his own dynasty. The next problem is how Robert and Ned interact. Again, the assumption is Westeros is medieval realism, feudal politics. Robert doesn't address Ned as a liege lord would one of his most loyal nobles. Instead, all of a sudden, he starts acting like an imperial king addressing one of his subjects. Now, we are expected to believe that just because the king has spoken, Ned no longer has any choice in the matter. He is obligated to go off and dutifully murder an innocent third party. I call bullshit. Under feudalism, the nobles had the right to bring grievances to their liege lord. and the liege lord was obligated to address those grievances. The liege lord did not have the power to hand wave the grievance away, say like his son trying to murder the noble's daughter. And he didn't have the power to order that noble to forget the incident ever happened. You see, the liege lord didn't want to risk the consequences, because if the noble did not feel that the liege lord was living up to his oaths and responsibilities, he could then make the legal claim that he was no longer obligated to live up to his oaths and responsibilities to the liege lord. The relationship could be severed. Randy, that's just theory. Practically and politically, Ned would have never risked the consequences of defying the king. Okay, let's look at the context. Robert Baratheon is old. He's tired and becoming weak. He's losing his grip on power. The nobles are becoming restless. They're starting to position and maneuver, getting ready for the succession fight. Some of them are already openly defying the king. So what could have Robert done if Ned had just turned, left the court, taken his family, and marched back home to his stronghold up north? What's even more frustrating, the king and queen acted incredibly stupid in this situation. They had an easy way out and didn't take it. Also illustrates why neither family would have allowed the two, Joffrey and Arya, to be alone together. Ned, my friend, my most loyal supporter, why are you here today? Sire, I come to you with sad news. Your son just tried to murder my daughter. Oh my God, we cannot have that. Guards, bring me my son. We must get to the bottom of this. Ned, when did this happen? Just this morning, sire. Who are your witnesses? Well, my daughter told me, the queen interjects. But Joffrey wasn't even there this morning. It wasn't me. It was Owen. I wasn't even there. He says that he was out playing basketball by the pool all morning. And I can have, or soon will have, 10 witnesses to swear he was there the whole time. Ned, how could you do this to me? And I trusted you. Be gone before I forget what you've done for me all these years. Instead, they acknowledged the incident occurred and then publicly punished the Starks for preventing Joffrey from finishing the job. And I'm supposed to believe that these two are brilliant political strategists, adept at maneuver and machination, who've managed to hold on to power all these years? Randy, you're being entirely unfair. George isn't a historian. He's not writing a history book. Westeros is a fictional world. You can't hold it to the standards of our world. That's a very good point. The problem with that argument, though, is that in order to suspend our disbelief, George is asking us to assume that Westeros is a realistic examination of medieval feudalism. But when you look closely, you realize that Westeros has very little to do with medieval feudalism. It operates by very different rules. Very inconsistent rules. If you start asking if Robert had the legal authority to order Ned to forget all about the attempted murder of his daughter, and if Robert had the legal authority to order Ned to go murder his own wolf, and if you ask the question if Robert had the political power and will to force Ned to do those things, begs the question, why did Ned go and murder his own wolf? Forget all about the attempted murder of his daughter. That one's easy, Randy. Honor. Ned Stark is an honorable guy. No. It's a fundamental misunderstanding or misrepresentation of what honor is. Specifically, medieval honor. What's more, Ned Stark acts out of character based upon how Martin described him up until this particular scene. Ned Stark is described as a loving family man, honest, brave, and loyal, an honorable noble. There is no way that he would have let slide that somebody tried to torture and murder his 11-year-old daughter. He would have demanded retribution. But you say, it's the Middle Ages. They were different back then? Let me just give you one example of how fathers could be in the Middle Ages. There were two families that decided to join political union, sealed the deal with a marriage. Not too long after the marriage, though, the new husband decided to beat the crap out of his wife. She wasn't too happy with this turn of events, and so she wrote a letter back home, telling everybody what happened. Short time later, the in-laws came for a visit. Apparently, it wasn't a one-time deal because they found her all battered and bruised. So her irate father and very pissed off brothers threw the new son-in-law off the battlements of his own castle. And before you ask, the son-in-law was of much higher status and much more politically powerful than the father and brothers. Didn't matter. A couple years later, the daughter remarried. Guess what? The new husband treated his wife really well. So, yeah, people were different, but they were the same. When it comes to the direwolf and Ned's honor, things get a lot uglier. George has made a big deal about family crests and banners and such. It's a huge part of the marketing of Game of Thrones. This is historically correct. Banners and crests were very important because they represented a family's honor. They were symbols of their oaths and obligations. Why did nobles wear their family crests into battle? Part of the reason was showing off. Look at me, look at me. But the other reason was to show to the world that they were fulfilling their oaths and obligations. Look, my liege lord called and my family responded. Look what we're doing in the name of our liege lord. People were willing to kill and even die to keep others from disrespecting their family crests. A noble's oaths and responsibilities don't just go up, they go down as well. Just as the king is their liege lord, they are the liege lord of the people on their lands. Their seal, their family crest, is a symbol of those oaths that they give to the people of their lands. In exchange for their loyalty, they promise loyalty in return, and they guarantee that they will protect their people even unto their own lives. Ned and the other Starks kept the direwolf puppies in the first place because the direwolf is the family crest of the Starks. They saw the direwolves as living representations of the oaths and obligations that they had made to their people. The direwolves, representing the Starks' retainers, gave unquestioning loyalty, and the Starks returned that loyalty, promising to protect the direwolves and their people from the slings and stones of the world up until including the Starks' deaths. When Robert tells Ned to go cut the throat of his own direwolf, morally, that would be seen as the equivalent of Robert wiping his ass with the Stark family crest, then throwing it in Ned's face and ordering him to go burn it. Historically, that never ends well for the wiper. What is the first rule of leadership? Never give an order that you're not 100% convinced will be obeyed. King Robert does something far worse. He puts Ned in a position to where he has to choose between oaths. On one hand, Ned should follow the orders of his king, orders that are definitely unethical and immoral, of dubious legal authority, and there's a real question of whether King Robert has the ability to force Ned to obey his orders. On the other hand, Ned will have to violate the oaths to the direwolves, and by extension, oaths to his people. Even Machiavelli warned, never force an honorable man to choose between his honor. It's too dangerous. King Robert is lucky that Ned didn't pull his blade and cut him down on the spot. There's a lot of historic examples of that exact thing happening. A retainer cutting down his liege lord in his own banquet hall because the liege lord forced him to choose between oaths. But Ned doesn't cut down King Robert. He marches off to dutifully cut the throat of an innocent. violating his oaths to the wolves and to his people. The moment Ned slit that direwolf's throat, he revealed himself to be a man without honor, with no integrity. Honor is just a facade, to be hidden behind and then thrown away at the first convenient opportunity. On top of everything else, by Ned not allowing Arya to learn to fight, he's ultimately responsible for the death of his direwolf. Not only is Ned dishonorable, he's a bad dad to boot. Wait a minute. Where have I heard that before? Honor's a facade. Honor's a facade. Oh yeah, critical theory. Honor, morals, and ethics? They're all just lies the bourgeois use to control and manipulate the proletariat. Ah, now I realize why I've never been able to suspend my disbelief. I've been operating under false assumptions this entire time. Westeros is not a realistic depiction of medieval feudalism. What George R.R. Martin is doing is a Marxist deconstruction of feudal society. At any rate, I hope I've given you all something to think about, and until next time, y'all be safe. If y'all are still here, I really appreciate it. While you're at it, why don't you give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell. Next time you can hear me yammer on about something else.
Please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment.